Welcome to the 2022 NNJR DE season. This is Bill Gilbert, and I'm helping getting the season started here by working on the advanced class for Lightning. So I'm hoping that many of you in the uninstructed groups will get a chance to look at this video and maybe pick up a tip or two that you can use for Lightning and for the season. And I particularly hope that's true for those of us who haven't driven since last fall. If you've been fortunate enough to drive this winter, then perhaps your skills are ahead of some of the rest of us, and you can use some of the more advanced ideas I'm going to suggest here. But there's ideas here for all experienced drivers, I hope, and I intend for this information to be useful to everyone who has driven over the winter or hasn't and is getting ready for the season in a couple of weeks. So with all of that, let's dive right in. We have the normal disclaimer that if you try something that we've suggested here and it doesn't work, it's your fault. But with that said, let's dive right in and talk about how to go faster safely. The first step is to have a consistent baseline. We'll say more about what that means, but we can't improve if we don't know where we're starting from. And given that, then we can change or improve one thing in an incremental fashion. No big dramatic quantum steps here. And then we practice that improvement until it becomes part of our baseline. Part of that practicing that makes it safer, and it's something that needs to be built into all of us on track, is what Peter Krause calls go, no go. We'll talk more about what that means. And of course, we can't be safe on track if we're not aware of what's going on around us. So situational awareness is always important. So here's another way to say the same thing about how to get better on track, thanks to Peter Krause. Those of you that listened to him in our seminar a year ago heard him say that, best execution of fundamental skills, fancy way of saying you really have to do this stuff well. And by that, he includes consistency and speed, car placement, control input, and so on. And he talks about practicing deliberately, adding speed incrementally, and balancing risk versus reward. So his words for what I just put in my words on the previous slide. So just a little bit of theory underneath all this. How do we learn? Well, we all throw around the term learning curve as if it's a curve like the red dotted line in this slide. But in fact, it doesn't quite work that way, especially as we get better at driving or anything else. We typically learn more in step functions, like you see in the black stepped line on the slide, where we are operating at some level, we make a change, we get better, we operate at that level for a while, and then we make another change and get better again. Well, those steps are required almost because we do have to practice something that we do differently. We can't just automatically go out and go faster. We have to make a change in how we brake. We have to change our line through a corner. We have to do something. And then we have to get that built into our baseline. That's these flat parts of this step function. And of course, we want to avoid getting stuck on a plateau, kind of the blue lines here, where we do the same thing over and over again without getting better. But that's not our focus for today. So what do we mean by a consistent baseline? Well, here's some ways to think about that. Of course, it should mean minimal variance in reference points. In other words, we're hitting the same apex, the same turn-in point at the same speed, lap after lap after lap. It also means we have a consistent mental picture or sight picture of each corner, and that doesn't vary. We know what corner is coming up. We know exactly what to expect. We know exactly what it's going to look like. It's built in. It's become somewhat automatic. And the car is feeling and behaving the same. If the car isn't feeling or behaving the same, then we can't be consistent. So those are some kind of markers, if you will. So how do we measure that? Well, the obvious answer would be lap time, but a better answer would be segment times, because a lap can be interrupted by traffic or one corner being better than the next and so on. Whereas if we work on segment times, then we reduce that variability and we can focus on a section of the track. We can also just, though, look at video. Video gives us often a good perspective of our line and some perspective of speed, not as much as having data, but video shouldn't be underestimated. In fact, Peter Krause, who makes his living coaching, says he always looks at the video first and then at the data. But of course, we don't need either of those. We can simply index each corner on the track. By that, I mean, we pick a point exiting the corner, we glance at the speedometer or the tach, and we see if we're at 6,000 RPM this time around, was it 6,000 the time before, and so on. So lots of ways to measure, are we being consistent on track? So let's assume we are. Where do we want to improve? What do I want to change in order to go faster? Well, there's typically a lot of low-hanging fruit, even with experienced drivers. And the best place to look for that low-hanging fruit is getting to wide open throttle faster, getting our foot on the floor sooner, earlier in the corner. And if you don't know in each corner right now where that point is that your foot goes on the floor, then the first thing to focus on is, am I being consistent with where my foot goes to the floor? And if I am, where is that in the corner? And now that I know where it is, do I think I could get on the gas a little bit earlier? If maybe I changed my line slightly, or if I slowed the car slightly more turning in, perhaps I can get to the gas sooner. These are the questions to ask, because optimizing corner exit is always the first step. So this is where the low-hanging fruit is, and where I encourage people to focus first and to make sure this part of your driving is optimized. Because if it is, it'll make a big difference, assuming it isn't optimized in advance. Now, if it is optimized, if you really are getting your foot on the floor as soon as it's possible to do that, well, there are harder things to work on. Corner entry speed. We can perhaps get into the corner a little bit faster than we are now, but we have to do that in a way that it doesn't compromise our corner exit. So it doesn't work to work on entry speed until we've optimized exit. If you don't know how soon you can get on the gas, why come into the corner faster? It's not going to help. So this is a second step, and it's also harder and riskier, as we'll talk about in a minute. So to summarize this, the priority of how do I improve always follows this sequence. Is the line correct? And yes, we can tweak it slightly, as I mentioned above, but fundamental line has to be there. Corner exit, always the next priority. Corner entry only after we've optimized exit, and late braking only after we've optimized exit and entry. Braking at the last possible moment runs high risk of compromising your entry speed and, for that matter, your exit speed. So moving the braking point in and is not the thing to do. Keep it 20 feet, 10 feet earlier than it needs to be until corner exit and corner entry have been optimized. So here's some examples to think about briefly. So let's think about turn 7 lightning and optimizing the exit. Do I know where I get my foot on the floor? Do I know how soon I get my foot on the gas pedal? Can I move those points earlier? What does it take to do that? And we can perhaps make some adjustments on track, by getting to gas a little bit sooner. And the risk factor here is low to medium. I mean, there's quite a bit of room at runoff here. So if we do get on the gas too soon and we have to drive the car off, there's room out in the grass to do that. And the corner has some, somewhat forgiving. I would call it forgiving. Track does come back on us and so on. But, we can experiment here, again, in small steps and small bites. Now let's contrast that with turn one. We can ask ourselves the same questions, but what's the risk factor if I decide to get on the gas a lot harder, a lot sooner, and now all of a sudden I'm going a lot faster earlier in the corner? What are my options? Well, not so good, because we all know the hill is in the way here as we get in the second part of the exit, and there's a curb there. So, yes, if we really screw up and we anticipate it and we can drive the car off in the dirt, there is room. That's good. But if we make a mistake and don't drive the car off, the risk is high. So just be aware that, yes, we can tweak all of these factors, but there has to be an assessment of the risk. We can do the same analysis on turn entry, and it's the same discussion, only with more risk associated with it, because now we're coming into the corner faster. So we have fewer options that we can apply that without the risk factor going up. So here, if we're going to increase entry speed, it needs to be by very, very tiny increments. In turn 7, there's some room out in the dirt if we get into it too fast. But there is a tire wall out there, which has been known to eat cars. Turn 1, same discussion we had before. If we get into turn 1 too fast and we realize it early, we can relax the wheels and drive off in the dirt. If we get into turn 1 too fast and realize it late and try to keep the car on the track, I guarantee we're going to hit the tire wall on the inside. So just food for thought as you're thinking about going faster. Now, I want to come back to consistency, because Peter Krause emphasizes how important that consistency is. He reinforces what I just said about corner exit before corner entry. And he adds this go, no-go system, which means that the car's not where it belongs. We no-go. We don't do whatever the next thing is we're going to do. So what is that system? It's something that we all, as advanced drivers, need to have built in to reduce our risk of incidents. Because generally big mistakes, in Peter's experience, are the result of lots of little ones that are accumulating without the driver being aware. And so we can apply this to our line, to our speed, to traffic, and to even recovering from errors. And it's as simple as every time we turn the wheel, every time we touch the gas pedal, every time we touch the brake, and so on, we decide whether everything's looking good or not. And if not, then we make an adjustment before we do anything else. Which brings me to situational awareness, which is an essential part, we all know that, of driving fast on track. And so here's just some reminders, especially for those of us who haven't been driving since last fall. How far ahead are we looking? In particular, are we looking at those flag stations as soon as we can see them? And at Lightning, we can see most of those stations a long ways in advance if we're looking for them. How wide is our vision? Are we aware of where pull-off and run-off spots are? Where is there room? How sensitive is our nose to the smell of antifreeze? Our sight to the oil on the track? And how well are you aware of yourself? Are you focused or are you distracted? And so on. Other factors, have you thought about an out? If there's two cars behind and you only see one of them, a yellow flag pops out when you didn't expect it. Here's some common mistakes. failure to anticipate or be aware of is the biggest one by far. We've all seen drivers who seem to be unaware of the traffic and passing, again, we're all rusty. We need to be aware that, we need to get back on top of our game in terms of giving pass signals and taking passes in safe places. And I emphasize all this because that built-in situational awareness, that built-in go, no go, needs to be part of that consistent baseline. It needs to be part of our consistency as a driver. If it's not, then that's where we need to focus our efforts. So as a summary, here's how, as we get back on track, we can go faster in a safe manner. We create that consistent baseline. We improve one thing in a small, incremental, step-by-step fashion. We practice it until it becomes automatic, but we practice it with that go, no go, so that if we make that change and all of a sudden it's not right, then we know how to bail out of it and correct and adapt. And we don't forget about situational awareness as part of that. If we do all that, then we can repeat this process and get better and better each time we come to the track. Now, with one bonus thought before I wrap up, again, thanks to Peter Kraus, who spends his living coaching mainly advanced drivers. Here's his most common opportunities for improvement. I called them common mistakes. Trying to go too fast in the slow parts of the track, inconsistent braking performance, getting on the gas too early, but then not getting the foot on the floor, and sloppy car placement. I put these up just because many of us haven't driven since last fall. We're going to be sloppy. So here's some things to be aware of. Hopefully none of us are going to make these mistakes, but I would be willing to bet money that we'll see others making these mistakes. I just hope it's not you. I look forward to seeing you at Lightning, and we will be doing some trackside classroom discussions on this material. So if you have any questions, you feel free to email me ahead of the event, but otherwise we hope to build in some discussion at the track. Again, look forward to seeing you at Lightning, and everyone have a great day. Okay. All right. Okay, so if we can get it to wake up here. Here we go. I think there we go. Normal disclaimer. So passing zones at Lightning, just a quick refresher for everybody. Mandatory passing on the right on the front straight between 1 and 2, and in the other two passing zones, they're between 5 and 7. It's on the right early, on the left later, and the reverse between 7 and 9. So I think that's pretty obvious to most people. If you're driving in red or black and expanded passing, we allow passing any place with a signal, except those mandatory sides still apply in those locations. So you can, you can pass, between 4 and 5, for example. That's a easy place to get a faster car by in red and black. So passing zones, hopefully no surprises there for anyone on the call. Skip that. I'm not going to run through the video. So anybody on this call that hasn't driven Lightning? I should have asked that before. So if everyone has, then you all can and should jump in here with both questions and comments, so that I make sure not only that I answer questions, but you may have observations that can help other people here. I make no claims of being an expert at Lightning. I've driven Watkins Glen enough times I can claim some level of expertise, including being in cars with a pro there, but I can't say the same for lightning. So anyway, turn one, the right-hander at the end of the front straight. There has a hill in the middle of it, obviously. So that allows us to modify what would otherwise be the line here. We can turn in a little bit earlier and we can brake a little bit later, but we do have to get the turning done earlier than we might otherwise like, because we need to be straight going over that hill. And we need to be back on at least some power, not full power, especially in a stronger car, but and we don't want to be all the way track left going over the hill, just to give ourselves a little bit of margin, because we're dealing with a blind hill here, right? And if we're not straight, or we end up too fast in here, if you do the smart thing and drive off, it's no big deal. But if you get in too hot and try to save it, then the consequences are ugly. It's unfortunately we've seen too often. This is kind of what it looks like. You can see the hill as we're in the braking zone, approaching the corner. Here you can see it is uphill. Some people like to run on the curbing here, at least, the first few inches of it. A lot of people use a lot of the curb here. In my experience, some cars are okay with that, but a lot of cars, get upset by hitting the curb here. So, take your pick here, but just that's part of being consistent. If you're going to consistently use a lot of curb here, you need to be aware of what and how your car is doing to respond to that, and respond accordingly. Track outs over the hill, just a reminder, pit out is to our right here. So we'll see cars as we come over the hill entering the track. But the key thing is straight over the hill and give ourselves a little bit of margin, because now that we get over the hill, we can see where track out is and can see where all the people have driven off in the dirt here, right? And hopefully driven off and not tried to hold it on the track. But please, if there's questions as we go around the track, jump in. Like I said, I'm not pretending any wizardry here. Everybody knows turns 2, 3, and 4 are connected sequence here. And I commend Dennis Maschio's YouTube to you, because he goes into quite a bit of detail on explaining how to drive this. So I'll try to explain that. But I think most people drive 2 and 3 using this line, where we don't apex turn 2 all the way on the curb. We're 4 feet plus or minus off the curb for the apex of 2. The objective being, I think I have it here, the objective is one big arc between 2 and 3, so that 2 and 3 are one corner, one turn of the steering wheel, where we're lengthening. Our purpose is to lengthen the straight section between turns 1 and 2, and to carry as much speed as we can, into through 2 and into 3. And for most people, that apex off the curb at 2 helps us do that. And that puts us out track left as we exit turn 2, but the same arc of the wheel brings us right back into the curb on the inside of turn 3. And in fact, we want to drive right over the beginning of that red and white curb at turn 3. So let's see what that looks like. Here's the approach to 2. This is the apex. I don't think in this particular photo that I grabbed that I'm the full 4 feet off, but so may not be the best photo, but the idea is the one big arc. Here you can see kind of, at the bottom here, the turn in for 3, which is just a continuation of that arc. And when I was before talking about driving over the curb, I was talking about this curb right here. So we want to just use the beginning of that curb, drive right over it. At least in my experience, that, continues that arc and sets us up to use as much of the track as possible as we head to turn 4. Now here's what that looks like as we approach 3, and here's that curbing again. The cone in this case, in my view, is way too late. I'd be on the early part of that curb, and then I'd be coming off of it. But the reason is that there's kind of 2 ways to approach turn 4, and the wider line that I've shown in red on this slide is kind of what we often teach, but isn't always the fastest or most comfortable way through there. So there's 2 options here, and the Dennis Macchio version and lots of other people's version is to basically ignore, if I go back here, is to ignore having the car mid-track here, but just as we exit, if I go back to, as we exit turn 3, we just basically take the car straight for the apex at turn 4, and ignore trying to get back to the right side of the track, and allowing us to, again, carry more speed all the way into turn 4. And as the slide says, some cars may require a tap of the brakes to help the car turn. The reason why that works is there's good grip and a little bit of favorable camber at the apex of turn 4. And there's a fair amount of track out. But the key thing here is that that allows us to carry more pace into 4 and lengthen that fast section that started exiting turn 1. So 2 different ways to drive this, 2 variations, I should say. But if you haven't tried one or the other, try the other one and see what you think. But these are the 2 main variations that I'm aware of for turn 4. It's hard to see in the photo here that there's favorable camber here at the apex, but you can feel that, or if you were to walk the track, you would see that. Here's track out for 4, lots of room out there. Turn 5, another turn dictated by the hill that's in the middle of it, and in this case, it's an important turn. It leads on to a fast section in the back, but it really has to be done, in some ways even more carefully than turn 1, because while we're not coming into it nearly as fast, it's a steeper hill, and the line after the hill is not straight like it is after 1. So, and in this case, the apex is blind over the hill. So we want to get, just like in turn 1, get the turning done going up the hill, and be careful with the power until we get to the hill. And in this case, this is more an issue for students, but we want to use all the track here at track out. So approaching the corner, the curb on the left here, most people drive this by lining the car up with this curb and then turning kind of at this last red stripe that's on the left side here. And obviously we can't see the apex from the turn in. We can't even see it after we turn in and head up the hill. It's still blind, right? We have to be well and truly on top of the hill to even see the apex. And I strongly recommend to everyone, including students, to just drive right on this curb. In general, I'm not a big fan of using a lot of curb, but in this case, the curb is friendly, and it really helps the angle of the corner to use a lot of this curb. Put the right front, put the right side right on the curbing here at the apex of turn 5, and then let the car track out as it comes down the hill, and use all of this track, because that makes it safer, number one, and number two, helps us set up, for the fast kink and six that follows here. Turn 7, lots of people's least favorite corner at Lightning, I think, and certainly where way too many mistakes are made. This corner gets overdriven more than any other corner at the track. And frankly, I guess I know why, but there's still no explanation for it. This is a slow in, fast out corner. Almost everybody brakes too late, trail brakes too much on this corner. Almost everybody. And it doesn't help that the brake markers are way too late here. Most cars need to brake before you get to the bridge or at the bridge at the latest. And if you wait till the brake markers, there's almost no way in most cars that you're going to get stopped down in time. Also on this corner, the apex is earlier than you might expect. I'll explain why in a moment. But it's very early on the curbing. It's the second red stripe, or maybe even sooner than that. And it's all because of the camber. There's favorable camber there, unfavorable later. So we want to do that. And we want to turn in at the end of the right side curb. And that wants to be the slowest point in the corner. We want to actually gain speed after we turn in here, unlike a lot of corners where we're still slowing down, getting to the apex. Dennis said, I don't know what car he was driving, but he was gaining 7 miles an hour between turn in and apex here, which is a lot. So point is, this is a slow in, fast out. You can even turn the car in a touch more when you get to the apex and take advantage of that extra camber that's there, just for a moment, to help your way through the corner here. So everybody knows, the bridge is here that dictates or sets up the braking zone. The braking zone's downhill, of course, a bit here, which doesn't help. It often feels a bit slippery to me. Certainly if it's wet, the braking zone here gets very slippery. But even in the dry, it's downhill. The corner invites you to brake late, and guess what? You end up off the track. Or if you don't end up off the track, you just end up slow exiting the corner. So turn in is right at the end of the curbing, right where the cone is in this photo. But again, this should be the slowest part of the corner. As soon as we turn here, we should be starting to pick up a little bit of gas. The apex is early. A few years ago, this first white bit of concrete wasn't here, and everybody, myself included, was apexing literally on the beginning of the curb. And they put the extra concrete in because it developed a big hole. But it's still, the apex is early here. A lot of people are apex this corner too late. And if you do apex it late or whatever, you can run out of track here. That's the other reason it's important to manage the entry here and manage it properly, because there is the track is unfavorably banked as you get toward the track out here. If you've executed the corner properly, your wheels are essentially straight at that point or very close to it. It's not an issue, but if you haven't executed it properly, it can become an issue. Everybody's favorite, right? Light bulb or the bowl, turn 9. Again, there's 2 lines through here, and I'm going to illustrate the one that I'm most familiar with, the one that I generally teach, and that many drivers prefer, but there are some drivers who prefer the other one, and I'll talk about both of them as we go through here. So the inside line, which is the one I'm going to talk about first, we aim at the gap in the wall. We brake kind of in a straight line. I describe it as tossing the car into the banking. Just let the car's momentum carry it right into the banking, but no more than halfway up. And then get the eyes around to the right, a long ways around. Look for the culvert, which is on the inside, and opposite more or less where the apex is and gradually bring the car down to that. The alternative line enters much closer to track left on, coming into the light bulb, and makes a big arc that has a slight decreasing radius to it, but one big arc with the objective to carry more speed, even though it's longer. And it's a line that Miatas like, apparently, and some other drivers prefer that line. I haven't done two back-to-back comparisons enough to know which one's faster in my car, so I can't. I just generally I'm biased toward lines that have less distance. So what it looks like it is as we're approaching. You see the gap in the wall, right? Makes a nice visual to aim at. The other thing I want to call your attention to here is this white line. See the white that's brighter along the grass here than the rest of the white line? That little section there, which is, 100 feet plus, is more or less straight, and it's a perfect reference for braking. Whatever amount of braking you need to do here, we can, the majority of it, we can do in a straight line right there, and then trail whatever amount of braking we feel we can trail up into the banking. This is kind of what it looks like, up a little bit further. As we get, even on this previous one, but certainly as we get a little bit further, the photo, even though it's a pretty wide angle lens, doesn't even get around as far as the apex. So our vision has to be, off the slide here to the right? Our vision has to be over here because that's where the apex is. So even when we're back here, our vision needs to be way around. We need to be thinking about way around to the right and get our eyes over there. And I don't have a good picture here that captures the culvert very well. I think my red circle may be where the culvert is, but I don't think we can. I don't think the slide has enough detail to pick that up. And then, of course, track out on the left here, and leading to the front straight. But I think I have it covered here. So just to summarize some reminders, turn one, if you're running wide for whatever reason, just drive off. And the same applies any place, but particularly there. Same applies at turn 5 that needs great respect to get that executed properly. Turn 7, we talked about, way too easy to overdrive it, get into it too fast. On the front straight, and this is what I should have emphasized a moment ago, we have to be aware as we're exiting the light bulb that pit in is over the hill on the right. It's blind, right? We can't see it. So if a car's pitting in, we may or may not see them. And if we give a pass signal exiting the light bulb, now both cars get crowded, never mind the pit entrance, because the track bends to the right. It technically has a turn number associated with it at that top of the hill there. So it's really quite a potentially dangerous situation, exiting the light bulb until we get over the hill onto the front straight and can see everything that's in front of us as we get on the front straight. So a lot of places that deserve respect to pay attention to. That said, lots of people like the track, and it is quick, and so lots of ways to enjoy it.